Hey everyone, it's Chris, and welcome to another thrilling episode of my series on his Dark Materials. This time we're going to be looking at episode 3 and 4, so we can get caught up for the episode that is on tonight. And as you can see, things are a little different. Not going to be my normal pictures with audio videos. I've been having an issue getting things out because of just stuff at home, and so to get caught up, since we have a new episode tonight, and to simplify the process, you're going to see my physace through this one, so I apologize in advance. So with all of that out of the way, let's just jump into the video and get going. If this is your first time here, I take TV shows and movies based on books and compare and contrast them to the source material, so there might be spoilers ahead. Viewer beware. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any of my future videos, and click the notification icon to join the notification squad, as it were, and be the first to know when something new drops. So just a quick note, I will be reading notes for this video, which I normally do when I'm making these videos, but you can't see me, so it's not quite as distracting. So if you see me looking in this general direction, I am looking at my notes so that I can give you the lowdown. So let's jump into our first difference between the show and the book. First up, we have Lyra and the Gobblers. Well, so this was the same as in the book for the most part. The only real difference here was the identity of the kidnappers. In the books, it was not the Gobblers at all. It was another group of nefarious individuals, ne'er-do-wells, if you will, who are kidnapping the children and not the oblation board. In the books, this sets off a little adventure that Lyra has with Egyptians, kind of what you see in the show, but just with some slight tweaks. I had to think about this for a bit, and I think I do like it better the way they have it in the show, that they went straight to it being the Gobblers or the oblation board, because now you can skip ahead and move a little faster with the plot. So good change, writers. Next up, we're going to look at Lyra and the Egyptians. So I find how they changed this very interesting. In the novels, she isn't very distrustful of the Egyptians. I mean, she knows some of them, especially the Costas, but it just seemed weird to me that she had just come out of a situation where she had trusted someone implicitly, that someone being Mrs. Coulter, and had it all just kind of blow up in her face. And you would think that having that kind of moment in her life just recently, that she would be less likely to really trust someone and jump on board with them. So I much prefer the way they had this in the show, that she's a little standoffish, a little distrustful, and a little bit rough with them in the beginning. So fantastic change on the part of the writers there. Next up, we have Lyra and the Speech. So yeah, this was 100% new for the show, and I was really not a fan. And look, I am not talking about from the perspective of how it played on the screen, or how it was written, or how well it was acted, or any of that stuff. It was a bad moment of change for the character of John Fa. They sacrificed something of his character to give it to Lyra when they didn't need to, and it actually impacts negatively, in my opinion, the relationship between John and Lyra and how it develops later in the episode. This moment in the novels was all about John Fa. It was about establishing who he was as a character, who he was as a leader, and what kind of authority and sway he had with Egyptian people. And taking that moment where Lyra gives a speech and convinces everyone that it's a good plan and we should go with it, like that, really does damage to his character. That moment in the novels where Lyra kind of just stands and watches while John rallies his people, gives her the basis for trusting him and believing in him, and the reader, or the viewer in this case, the same thing. We got to see how powerful his presence was in his people's lives, and how effective he was at silencing dissent, at rallying them to a cause and kind of galvanizing them into a single unit. And that was just missing for his character in the show since they moved it to Lyra. So did not need to do that. Not a fan. Wish they wouldn't have. Moving on. So next we're going to look at Lyra and John Fa. In the novel, John Fa and Coram are the ones that relate Lyra's parentage to her, the fact that she is the daughter of Lord Asriel and of Mrs. Coulter. And you get some basic exposition here, and you get Coram explaining some things that you didn't get in the show. But for the most part, having it come from Ma Costa herself, who we find out in the novel is the Egyptian woman that Lyra was given to and kind of became part of their family for a little while, way better. In the novels as well, it was kind of just matter of fact. It was just boom, 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 and here's this, that, woo, you have a dad and a mom, isn't that great? They're not dead, they're just horrible people. Having that be more of a confrontation between Lyra and Ma Costa, and the stakes that you felt were involved, and the way they played it off on the banks of the river with that kind of little ditch between them, and it was like they're on two sides of divide, and just visually it was way better. From a storytelling point, I think it was way better, and from a character development point, it was definitely better. So another fantastic change on the part of the writers there, so bravo again. And lastly, for episode 3, we're going to look at confusing journeys. I really, really don't like how they keep jumping between our world and the world of his Dark Materials. It's taking up time in each episode that would be better served with exploring and furthering the plot that actually matters for right now, which is what's going on with Lord Asriel, Mrs. Coulter, Dust, the trip to the north to save the children. All of that stuff should be front and center in everything that is done in this season of the show. And every time they take a detour to our world, it just drives me crazy, and it breaks the momentum and development of the other plots in a way that is not helpful. I just wish that they've established now that's going on. It would be great if that storyline kind of peters down to a very small couple of scenes and a couple of episodes at the end of the season. And we get most of our exposition and our focus story-wise on the story that is happening that actually matters, especially now that we're getting to the north and we're getting to armored bears, and all of the stuff that people really love about the show love about the books should be on display front and center. So not a fan of this storyline at all. Wish they'd stop. Okay, we're going to look at episode 4 next, and there was only probably 2 or 3. Let's see. There's only 2 things I really want to talk about because they take up the majority of the episode, and there were a ton of changes that are very fascinating in there, so let's just jump in and talk about them. Okay, first up, we have My Favorite Texan. There were quite a few changes with the introduction, especially of Lee Scoresby, and this is a great example where an adaptation can greatly improve upon the source material. First off, the introduction of Lee was completely new for the show. He just kind of shows up randomly with no fanfare in the book and brought in a different way. Being able to see him in his balloon as an aeronaut, visually it was just wonderful to see, but more than anything else, it was a really dynamic way to introduce his character, and it introduced his character with his own dynamic. He's motivated by his own actions, not just kind of lulling about in a port town, which is kind of what we see in the novels. So much nicer on that side. I mean, even down to the next part that they changed, which is why Lee was in town at all. In the novels, he's in town because an expedition that he was signed up to go on didn't get the funding it needed and never happened. So he's just kind of hanging out in town, waiting for something to happen or to decide what he's doing next. And they chance upon him because of that. And even more so, it is John Fa who brings him on the team. And it happens off screen or off page, if you will. You just see John Fa again and it's like, woo, I got an aeronaut, I'm so excited, which is cool, but not as beautiful as what they did in the show, with it being a motivation of friendship and obligation that has Lee even there, that he's looking for the armored bear, he's looking for Iorik and wants to help him. That's a way better introduction of a character, having that motivation. It also tells you about that character in some ways that are really compelling and great. So again, fantastic change on the part of the writers. And something you're going to see as we talk a little bit more is that in this episode, they did a really good job of taking actions and moments from other characters and giving them to Lyra in this episode that were fantastic, as opposed to the previous one where I talked about how the speech at the roping really should have, all of that should have stayed with John Fa, because it didn't really help Lyra's character and it diminished his in a way that was problematic, in my opinion. In this episode, you have the exact opposite, where they took small moments that you really wouldn't think would necessarily be important and gave them to Lyra, and it gave her an arc in this episode that was fantastic and helped show character growth and development in a way that we wouldn't have had any other time. And for instance, John Fa bringing in the aeronaut being moved to Lyra was fantastic, because now Lyra did it as almost an act of defiance, because she's out there doing all of the stuff. John Fa is really not having it, but she's doing it anyway because she's Lyra. And one of those things she does is unofficially hires the aeronaut on behalf of the Egyptians, and they don't even find out until the end of the episode. It was a fantastic way of bringing him into the team, if you will, and giving Lyra a really beautiful moment that tells us something about her character we would not have known before, which is her ability to kind of see a situation, make decisions, and kind of arrange things in a way that that is advantageous to herself and everyone around her. So very cool on that one, writers. Okay, next up we're going to talk about an armored bear. This was another place that there were changes from the novel, and moments and actions moved from other characters to Lyra that was fantastic and made the entire story better. The first is when Coram and Lyra are visiting the Witches' Council. In the novels, it is Coram driving everything in this meeting, which makes sense given who he is, his experience with the witches, and Lyra's non-experience with the witches, until the question of the alethiometer arises, as we see in the show. Then Lyra is an active participant in the conversation. The big change here, though, that I think makes incredible sense and is wonderful on the parts of the writers, is moving the asking of the question, what should we be asking the Witches' Council, to Lyra from Coram. Coram asking that question makes complete sense. He's a shrewd, wise, worldly Egyptian. That makes perfect sense. But having Lyra say it, who is this child that we're watching grow up before our eyes and mature, is a beautiful moment of character development for her. In essence, we're watching her confidence in herself and her own judgment and her own instincts grow in relation to how comfortable she is using the alethiometer and how much more adept she is at getting that. They go hand in hand, and being able to see that on screen was fantastic, and probably my favorite change, even though it's so small, in the episode. Next, we're going to talk about the recovering of Iorik's armor. In the novels, this is, again, like, there's this thread of things just being kind of ho-hum, by the book, by the numbers kind of thing in the novels. Everyone's on board with getting the armored bear, which of course they would be. It's an armored bear in the novel. And even when John Fa finds out the supposed backstory as to why Iorik is in the town and doesn't have his armor, it's kind of just like, oh, well, you know, he might be a little bit of trouble. We now have this really cool aeronaut over here. Let's just move on. It would have been cool to have a bear, but it's also cool not to have one. It's all just very, very laid back, which is, you know, interesting, but far more compelling in the series with him just being, I am the Western King and you do what I say, little girl. We're not doing that. Let's just move on. And then as an act of defiance, as well as showing that she's starting to intuit things in ways that no one else is, she just goes and sets it all up. She finds his armor, strikes the deal with him to come with him if she helps get his armor, and then gets him going. So way better in the series from a character development, from story development. It was way more exciting, and there was a thrill to it of seeing her chafe against the constraints of authority that she's kind of been doing through the entire series and story in a way that isn't a child playing. This was something that was serious and important, and she knew it and was willing to fight and go around the established authority figures to do what she thought was right, what she knew was right. So wonderful addition here, and just small movements like that are what really make something sing in the way we're seeing in this show. Okay, that is it for this video. As always, if you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down. It's a free internet, not going to hold it against you. Subscribe if you haven't. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you can leave them in the comments. And just as an FYI, a heads up, if you will, I will be hopefully releasing 2 videos for episode 5 tomorrow. So just so we're on the same page, a commenter came through this week and brought up something that was very interesting, and I thought I would give it a try and also see what you, my dear community, think about this. In a nutshell, the argument was posited that comparing the book to the TV show and what differences there are is a niche subject within a niche subject, of being looking at TV shows is already niche, and then carving it down even more means that the audience that would be interested in these videos would be very small. The idea was, if I did just a regular review video talking about plot, character development, the normal things, without focusing so much on the differences between the source material and the adaptation, I'd have a wider audience. We'd have more people here, which would be great. A bigger community with more people participating respectfully would be wonderful. So what I'm going to do is, for the next video, I'm going to make 2 videos. I'm going to make this video, this normal one. It's what I love to make, and it's my commitment to you subscribers. You subscribe because this is what you like as well. So still going to do that. But I'm also going to do a talking head video like this, where it's just me talking about the episode, doing a lot of what I do in these videos anyway, but not from the perspective of, did the plot development get better because of the change between the book and the show, but just talking about the plot development, how it went from episode to episode, just breaking it down and talking to you about it. So those will be out tomorrow. And all I need from you guys is, if you feel like it, watch the new type of video and let me know what you think. You can let me know what you think in the comments of this video as to whether or not it's a good idea in the first place. And then if you do watch both videos tomorrow, let me know what you think. Was it worth doing? And is it better? Does it bring something to the channel that we didn't have already? So yeah, I think that's it. I've talked quite enough. So yeah, that is it for me. Like I said before, if you have any comments or questions, make sure to throw them at my face holes, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Until I see you guys in the next video, take it easy.